based on what is known today. One of my favorite phrases, I use it 6 times every day. Well, what does that mean? If you think about where we were in February of 2020, none of us knew that literally a month later that the world would be shut down with the pandemic. There's going to be things that, slide in from the side or over the top of the mountain. And we've got to be ready for that. So I can be authentic and transparent and answer a question like that, but know that the answer may have to change tomorrow based on externalities over which we have absolutely no control.
Jeanette, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm lovely. It's a bright, sunny day here. I'm looking forward to it. Most looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, don't show off because it's a miserable day as always in the UK. So it's
it's the UK weather.
Yeah. It's true. Yeah, it'd be more shocking if it was warm. We'll be like, what's going on? As well. But anyway, how you been? How are things?
It's a busy time of the year. And we are getting ready for the end of our fiscal year. So, the activity really boils to a great temperature and we're off and running. So lots happening.
Nice.
But not only within our company, but within the HR community too. With the change in administration here in the United States, we've seen lots of new executive orders and legislation, legislative directives that we will need to sit back and take a look at. So it's a really intense time for those of us in the HR field.
Yeah. And it's not slowing down either, is it?
No, it's not. It's not. So we just need to get ready for that pace and hope that all of us have been practicing to run a marathon.
Yeah. Before we get there, let's take a step back a second. Tell everyone a little bit more about yourself personally and your journey to where we are now, and a little bit about the organization if people aren't aware of it.
So my journey is really a three-legged stool. From when I was a college work-study student, I looked at technology and how it could automate processes that would enhance student service in the area of student financial aid. And it went from there. And so technology, productivity, and then change, because all three go together. And so it was that three-legged stool that's been really the pillar of my career. And I have an amazing education that I was gifted by the American University in Washington, D.C., and a degree in psychology and sociology, another master's degree in student development and counseling, and then my doctorate is in public policy from the University of Southern California. And that has really helped me dig in to the workplace issues that we tackle every day. I spent about 10 years of my life saying I never wanted to be in HR, just to be in shadow HR, serving the business. And my tenure, nearly 10 years at Intel, 5.5 at American Express, was in shadow HR organizations because the business needed something that the standard HR wasn't set up to accomplish. And so we did. That is not ideal, though. Ideally, HR should, in fact, be meeting the business functions needs. And so that's what I spent the last 10 years doing.
What do you mean by shadow HR?
So we set up recruiting. We set up everything, including performance metrics, training, high potential programs, everything except the basic HRIS.
I see.
And compensation and benefits, meaning they were administered centrally, but everything else was done in the business. And that really is considered shadow HR because HR Central would have recruiting and learning and development all. It wasn't directed at what the business needed, and that's why they brought me in. And literally, my career, if you were to say in one statement, has been to align corporate goals with the human capital to ensure fulfillment on both ends.
Yeah. Was the goal of that shadow HR to give you more freedom within the framework, a bit more, be a bit more disruptive?
More freedom, be more disruptive, and more directed specifically to what we needed now and then.
Mm,
So,
love that.
it is, and the thing of it is that we talk a lot about agile and we talk a lot about meeting the needs. HR is a two-sided coin. You have the one side where you take care of people, you recruit them, you train them, you develop them and throughout their career. And then the other side of the coin is taking care of the business. But if the two strategies are not aligned, you're not going to have the opportunity to really maximize either. And that's really what has been the hallmark of my career the last 20 years.
Love that. Tell everyone about your current CHRO new role. Tell everyone a bit about the organization who perhaps not aware of it.
Yes, so I'm the Chief Human Resource Officer at 8 by 8. And we are an integrated telecommunications company, voice, video, chat, and all the above that is aided and abetted by integrated artificial intelligence. And I emphasize the integration because it's not sitting out on the side. It's embedded into the flow of the work, making everyone much more productive and making the technology a whole heck of a lot easier to utilize. So we are a 35-year-old company that has changed hats a number of times, and we are just in the throes of completing a 3-year strategic journey where we've been in this business with the integrated telecommunication, and we're really very excited about it because we're really enabling our customers to better serve and to connect with their customers.
Wow. That's incredible because obviously the technology you're discussing now, what you just mentioned, the business does didn't even exist. So you must have constantly been disrupting yourselves. What was the initial product of the business when it
So
first started?
initially, they in the first iteration, we sold a lot of telephone sets.
Wow, you've really
And
gone through the whole. That's so I love
oh,
hearing stories like this. It's so
and
cool.
plugging into the wall the
Yeah,
truck.
to teleconferencing and AI. Wow, that's.
Yep.
I just love hearing those stories.
Oh, it's wonderful to see the evolution of a platform that's specifically designed to help problems that we all have. And whether it's multinational, meaning multilingual communication, whether it is, it's wherever people are and enabling people to work wherever they are. And that's really, over the last 5 years, that shift has really taken hold, notwithstanding that many companies have gone back to on campus work in office, but there's still a lot of us, as you can see from my office, that work remotely,
Yeah,
and as I do. And it's a reality because what it does is it allows us to have access to talent we might not have otherwise.
yeah,
So I can hire somebody. We have about 500 people in Cluj, Romania. It's a great technology hub there. But there are types of technology where we go to Bulgaria or Bucharest and it's a bit far flung. No matter, they have the same interface
yeah,
as our folks that are in office in the Cluj building.
yeah.
So
Our
that,
engineering team for our AI is in Nigeria, which
see,
people are always surprised by, as well, which is incredible.
we need to get over that surprise
Yeah,
because technology is enabling the growth and development of workforces literally everywhere around the world. It's so exciting.
yeah. I can't move on without mentioning your background. Clearly, there's a passion there. If anyone that's listening, many horses. Tell us the story. I know there's a story there.
Oh, so I was from the time I started walking. I loved watching my mother and grandmother ride, and they had a dairy farm, and they had farm horses, And I was told I could not get on these draft horses unless somebody was out
Oh,
there
they
with,
had so draft horses for everyone listening, like are like the huge work horses,
oh,
right? Like they're like
absolutely.
giants.
Well, and think of the Budweiser Clydesdales, the two boys over my left shoulder.
Yeah.
Uh, and uh, and so as a toddler, my mother and grandmother saw me trotting down the driveway on one of the old draft horses, no saddle, no bridle,
Oh
hanging
my
onto the
God.
mane. And they came running out and both very accomplished equestrians themselves, on work horses. And they said, "We told you." I said, "Oh no, Tata's over there. There's somebody out here." But my passion for horses really stemmed from the two of them, as does my love of dogs and the care that they so richly deserve. But the paintings that you see in my office are of the boys that have taken me around the world to learn, to compete, and to spend time with four-legged creatures that are just amazing.
Yeah.
And so I ride a sport called dressage,
Yep.
not widely known in the
Well,
United States.
it's big in the UK. It's huge
Oh,
in the UK.
absolutely.
Huge in
You
the
have one
UK.
of the world's best
We
riders
we
in our
won. I think we
sport.
won the Olympics, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So but the reason it appeals to me is that it is a cerebral sport. If you don't connect with the sentient being that you're sitting on, all 1,700 pounds, there's no connection there and you get no performance. With a connection and understanding what they need and what you want, which really isn't that the way we train people, whether it's a kindergarten student or a college student. It's that connection. And that's one of the reasons why I love the sport so much. People will say, "Oh, you just sit in that saddle." Yeah, if I sat in that saddle with these critters, I'd be in the sand or in the next county if I wasn't paying attention.
What have you learned from, everything from, you mentioned like rescuing dogs to STEM programs, which I know that you're very passionate about, to horses. What are some of the things that you've taken away from those passions that have impacted your career as a CHRO?
One of the first things that I learned and in working with, and I'm terrible at reprimanding any of my pets, whether they're four-legged and weigh 1,700 pounds or, the basset hounds that ran around my house for many years. But a behavioralist once told me there's a 100-to-1 ratio. Every time you let somebody get away with something, misstep under saddle or misbehaving in the house for a dog, it takes you 100 times to correct that behavior because they say, "Oh, I can get away with this." And so it becomes learned for them, and unlearning takes a ratio of 100-to-1. And one of the things that has impacted me as a leader, never mind as a leader of people functions, is that consistency is absolutely imperative. Why do I say that? Because if you're here one day and, around the corner the next, people don't know what to expect. And our brains are wired for consistency and what is known. And
Mm,
so, in the face of the unknown, it has to fill in the blanks with what it does know. And so, we never get the optimal level of connection, whether it's an animal or a human. Some people don't like the reference aligning humans with pets, but it really that rhythm does work if consistency is absolutely key to what you need to do when you're training an animal or whether you're training an individual.
yeah. And you're not comparing, you're just talking about the principles.
It's just the
The
principle of
principles that align
consistency.
across consistency. I don't think anyone can deny that part. How do you maintain that when you want to drive consistency, but how do you do that when there's so much ambiguity, right?
Oh,
Because
well,
because it kind of like a paradox.
and one of the things is that people are asking for more transparency and more authenticity. We just did an all hands last week, and someone said, "Will there be layoffs?" And so, one of my favorite phrases, and I emphasize it today because I use it 6 times every day. I start the answer to that question with, "Based on what is known today." This is my answer. And they say, well, what does that mean? And it's, if you think about where we were in February of 2020, none of us knew that literally a month later that the world would be shut down. And so with the pandemic. And so there's going to be things that, slide in from the side or over the top of the mountain. And we've got to be ready for that. So I can be authentic and transparent, but also know and answer a question like that, but know that it may have that the answer may have to change tomorrow based on, externalities over which we have absolutely no control.
Yeah. What's the typical reaction that you get
Well,
from?
I have explained why I use that phrase so that
Interesting.
so that people understand I'm telling you what I know now, but don't expect that it will hold tomorrow, a week from now. If you think about some of the more poignant moments in our history, think about 9/11 and how air travel in the United States literally came to a halt. We didn't know that morning that what was going to happen or the reaction. And so I remind people that there's nothing that we could have done at Intel, for example, which is where I was working at that time, to really alter that. And yet distribution stopped because we used airplanes to ship chips around the world. We had people that were stranded in many, many locations, and we needed to get them home. But I didn't know that the day before. And so I want people to understand we can tell you what we know today, and then we'll tell you when we know something different tomorrow.
Yeah. I think people appreciate that transparency. And
Well, it
we would love
always
to. We
gives
would
me
love
an
to.
opening.
No one has a crystal ball to give you the answers. So whilst it's not maybe not the answer that they want to hear, it's the truth. Uh,
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
yeah, I love that.
Yes.
And that goes to building trust, right? Because if you're only just giving people the answers that they want to hear, then they may be happy at the time, but then all of a sudden they're surprised when there's a layoff. Well,
Well,
yeah, you'd rather be transparent up front.
I'll share an experience that I had with my CEO at Igloo. And this is a man, he's still a very, very dear friend. And there had been a series of ownership changes over the course of about 10 years. And the private equity group that we worked were the fourth in 10 years. So it's buff, shine, sell, buff, shine, sell. And so the last private equity owner had said, we want to invest for the long term. And so we want to get out of this cycle, hire, layoff, whatever. And so someone asked the CEO about that, and he said, we will not have layoffs. That worked until about 2 weeks later,
Ah,
Hurricane Harvey hit and literally flooded about 2.5 million square feet of manufacturing and distribution. And, so you can imagine what our quarter revenue looked like.
is it
We were
Igloo's a
shut
food
down.
company, right? Just for everyone listening. Food.
Igloo is the cooler company.
Oh, that company. Oh, there's another Igloo
Yes.
in Europe. There's like a food manufacturing Igloo company. So
Okay.
okay,
Well,
cool.
we keep their food. We kept their food cold.
Okay,
So
great.
yeah.
Okay.
So, but literally we were underwater for 2 weeks. And so the quarter, was really hit hard. And, when you don't have a place for people to work, there's no work. So we were able to keep people on during the majority of that, but there were layoffs. So then people came back to the CEO, several months later and said, you said there would be no
They won't
layoffs.
forget. Yeah.
And he said, yes, and that's where the phrase based on what I knew then
I like it.
came from.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start using that in all facets. I'm gonna say it to my wife next time she asks me a question. Based on what
There
I
you
know
go.
now,
It,
right?
you know, it actually is reassuring to children because then they know you intend, if possible, to make something happen. But
That's true.
you know, uh, uh, you know, you have hurricanes, you have tornadoes, you have earthquakes, forest fires, whatever, Mother Nature might hand us.
One of the things I'm
Never mind
interested to get your
economic forces.
yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm interested to get your thoughts on is like there's been quite a few surveys and research that show very strongly that employees look towards their organizations for guidance more than their own government, right? They look towards and we saw this in COVID, right? People were like to their businesses, what do we do, as opposed to more so even our own governments, which kind of seems is really interesting when you think about it. Should companies see themselves as change makers beyond just employers? Is there a
Yes.
responsibility there? If so, why?
So the thing of it is, the way we are as humans, we are part of a herd. And so, you go home to your wife. I don't know if you have children or if you have pets, but you go to a unit where you live, where you hang your hat. And so you think kindly and more highly of your home environment than you do. It is, we make connections with our managers, with our teams, and they become just as much as part of our neural biologically wired need to be seen and heard. They know us, they care for us, and we expect that. And so that's why communities and companies have done such amazingly good work in so many places around the world because employees connect with managers. Remember, and we've known this, and the research has been replicated, time and time again over the last 30 years. People don't leave companies, they leave managers. And so there is that herd that people become a part of. We call it a team or a department or a unit. And so it is that people wire into. And then if they can bring that along with them into the community, there is an annual breast cancer awareness and research 5K walk that we do here in Katy, Texas every year. And the companies sponsor their employees to walk the 5K, and they represent their own interests at the same time they represent the company. And so it does become almost that indivisible line between the community, the company, and the employee. And I think we need to remember that. It's absolutely powerful.
Yeah. Would you say that the same thing goes for well-being and mental health?
Oh, absolutely. Um, it's interesting. Um, we just did our employee survey and we had highs and lows like every company. We have a very high response rate. We have had a very high engagement score. We have traditionally, and but there were some pockets. If you look at the heat map results, there were some pockets of sensitivity, and we dove into that and dug into it. And people said they wanted more time with their managers, and so we scheduled one-on-ones and just all sorts of things. Well, one of my managers called me and said, I just want you to know that two of my five people were not getting the help they needed out of the EAP. And I said, why not? And here they were, they had needs, whether it's counseling or just somebody to listen to them. And so we were able to rectify that, but they didn't even know until we had the discussion. They tried the EAP, it didn't pan out. We have since fixed that, but you're going to, when you see somebody 8 to 12 hours a day, you're going to see more of their mental health than perhaps they will be at home. We all wear masks and armor, as Brene Brown liked to describe it. And when you find what the real issue is, it's much easier to provide the help that somebody needs. We talk about burnout and how burnout is so prevalent. That's not it becomes a mental health issue, but it really is a corporate overload and overwhelm issue. And
Yeah.
so corporations have to take responsibility for that.
Yeah. And most companies don't give the managers and leaders the support and training they need to even have these conversations and
You know,
support it,
and
right?
and the thing of it is the mindset that we've been shaking and we really work hard at it, is to make sure that people understand as managers, their job is to be the one-stop shop for whatever the employees need. And then they have HRBPs, they have employee relations specialists that they can turn to get the help, but their employee comes to them. We expect them to seek the assistance that the employee might need, whatever it might be.
Yeah, yeah. But in order for them to do that, they need the right training, right? Because like when I became a
Absolutely.
leader or a manager, we wasn't talking about well-being or leading with empathy, right? Or any of these topics that are really probably for priority right now, for many people, as well. And I think sometimes managers think it's their responsibility to have an answer instead of actually just being there and listening and then signposting as well. So I think there's a lot of work we still need to do in that space to
Well,
help.
it gets back to the idea of lifelong learning that you know, I there's a mastermind group of HR professionals that I've been a part of for the last 5 years. And we try to meet every Thursday. And initially we did because none of us knew really how to handle the pandemic.
Yeah.
And, what do we do? And we had to learn about flexibility and working from home and engaging people remotely and things. And, Chris, that is such a different set of skills than the ones that we were probably grilled and drilled on in universities or even in the course of the day. We've got to be lifelong learners. The world is changing around us every moment, and it's up to us to keep current with it. I tell people every time that I get together with them, I end by saying, learn something new every day. And they say, and somebody challenged me a couple of months ago and said, why? And I said, because the people that are learning something new every day are more competitive than those that sit it out. And
Yeah.
they were like, oh, okay, now we get it. Now
Yeah.
we get it.
I think a powerful thing I've been focused like that I've been doing pretty much my whole life, even from the sports days, is rather than like learning everything new every day, yes, is important, but like even more important, I think, is actually doing, acting on it every day. So one of the things I try to do is actually I've reduced the amount of material I consume for learning, and actually instead focus more on learning something and then executing on it. So more like execute every day. Oh, because a lot of people, they know, a silly example, they know how to lose weight, they know how to eat healthy, they know how to do, but how many people then actually wake up and say, actually today I'm going to focus on executing on those learnings? And if you see any of the high performers or incredible leaders I've had on this show, they're really good. Yes, they're growth mindset learners, but they're even better executors.
Well,
Uh,
they take the learning to experience, which
yes.
is execution, right?
Hmm.
And our household is a group of basketball fanatics, and they're very happy right now. March Madness, and we're getting near the end of the NBA season, and the finals will be coming up. And Stephen Curry, who, for anybody who knows anything about basketball, has really changed the game.
Yeah.
And I dove into his autobiography about executing. And he's the first one in the gym in the morning. He's the last one to leave at night. Here he is. He has broken virtually every record in shooting and three-point shots, and from the throw line, all of these things. He still does it. He's in better shape every time he comes to camp than he was the year before. He knows age takes out a little bit, but he executes and he says, you can't learn and be better by what I do by reading a book or even watching films.
Hmm.
He said that's helpful, but it's the execution on the
Yeah.
floor that really enables excellence.
I think
And
I
that
think it
just
goes for anything in life, right? Like I always say to my friends, like it's all about reps. If you listen to episode 1 of this podcast, it sounds terrible compared to episode 1,000. But like, how many people are going to put in 1,000 reps, right, to do that? And it's the same with I grew up playing ice hockey and basketball, by the way, as well. So like it's all around reps. Like I missed thousands of shots, right, to learn how to hit a shot from the free throw line. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And then take music and art, a ballerina or a painter or a
mhm.
sculptor, and how many attempts that they have before you go to the Met and see, the prima ballerinas, and you're absolutely swept away by their grace, beauty, and athleticism. And then you think, how many hours do they practice in order to have a performance of that caliber,
Yeah.
even with great talent?
You mentioned early in your career a reference of plowing over people. What does that mean? And what did it teach you?
Well, the example behind that comment is that I'm very literal. And my then senior vice president, and a man to this day that I adore, said, Jeanette, we need this system installed. It had been a matter of discussion and dissension for about 2 or 3 years, but it had compliance elements. It had, scheduling and learning. I mean, it was really important that we get this system in. And he looked at me and he said, go do it. And I said, okay. And so I did. I know, and I don't say this with lack of humility, but I can move faster than most people. And so because I'm driven with a very literal goal. And so things on the cusp, like bringing people along with you, a learned trait, ensuring that people understand the role and mission, a learned trait. So I put that system in on time, as directed, and I had enemies everywhere. I left IT in the dust. I left the central HR in the dust. I left even my colleagues, some of them sitting around the leadership table, And Jerry Parker would say, well, I told Jeanette to do it and she did it. And they look at me and they say, yeah, and she left a lot of bodies in her wake. And it didn't dawn on me that execution isn't just getting the goal done, but it's bringing people along, it's educating and informing, and it's compromise.
Yeah, and that's where the plowing through comes.
Oh, yes, absolutely, absolutely, yes.
So what was the biggest lesson? You said you mentioned one, which is bringing people along. Did you along the way? But you learned that the hard way. It sounds.
I did. Again, the larger the organization, the more nuanced your response has to be, because you're talking about 125,000 people potentially that this system could have impacted, really about 85,000 in the manufacturing ranks. And, I thought of the directive, not of the influence of my work or the outcome of my work.
How would you start
And
now then? So if you had to go back and do it
uh,
again, what would be the first steps you would take? And for people
the
listening at home.
stakeholder temperature take. So who's in, who's out, who knows about this? And it's amazing how many people around a leadership table will go, tell me about that. I don't really understand what this is about or why it's so
Or what does it mean
important.
for me? Mm.
Yes. Well, first the importance to the company, and then what does it mean
Yeah.
for you and your team?
Hmm.
Because we as leaders represent 40, 50, 70, 170 people behind us. And that really is the key learning there. It's not just getting it done, but helping people understand you're doing it for a purpose.
They can push the plow with you.
Yes. Well, and
Or pull it, or
then
pull it. Sorry.
yeah, absolutely. And you think about it, and suddenly an effort that was challenging and difficult, and lots of late nights and weekends and flying around the world to ensure a quote unquote smooth implementation. If I had done the groundwork first, it would have enabled me. One of my colleagues from USC told me one time, go slow to go fast. And the more you invest up front, the better off you're going to be
Yeah.
down the line. Now, sometimes
I've
we
made that
just have
mistake.
to move.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
made that mistake in my career of just plowing through and then realize the hard way. I got the job done,
Well,
but at what cost?
exactly, exactly.
Made some
It's
enemies
at what
along the way.
cost? Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
um, I want to ask you around. You mentioned that you've learned to stop saying yes to everything, and that was a big moment for you. So, if that's the case, how do you decide now what's worth your time and deserves a yes?
So I have a three-part vision for each year: personal, professional, and health. And so I really look at where I am today and where I want to be at the end of the calendar year. And so, and then for my work, we look at quarterly objectives to get us to the end result of year's end. And so I make sure that when I say yes to something, that it will serve part of my primary objective for my life or for the year. So my three values are: I care for those who need it. And what I mean, the elderly, those who are differently abled, those, youngsters, children, anybody that needs a hand. And let me tell you, there are a million things that any one of us anywhere in the world can and should do if you're good at it. And so one of the things that I've done is to say, look at my roadmap. Does what I'm being asked to do fit in my roadmap? And is it worth the time and energy? Or is it something that will, that it's expected, but nobody really cares? It's just that it's become one of those expected things. I don't do the expected anymore unless it has value. And there are things I don't like to do. And so rather than just doing them because I was good enough to do them reasonably well, if I don't like to do them, I don't, because it is such an energy drainer.
Oh, you just took the
And
word. You took the
so
word out of
that
my
is,
mouth. Yeah,
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 that is, but there's a part of me that says, well, I know I can do it better than anybody else.
yeah.
That I could always use a little more humility when I'm talking to myself. But one of the things, if I don't like it, like, the organizations that I support and that I work with in the community, um, I don't like raising money. I can write a great grant, I can make a super presentation, but just let me do what I'm best situated to do: talk to people, coach, counsel, train, educate, inform. That's where I have biggest impact.
And that's
And
also what
and
gives you energy, right?
oh man, does it ever get me in front of a classroom, and
Yeah.
and we can spend days
That's a
together.
good activity for anyone, everyone listens to go through. I did it with, or two things. One, I did it with Shane, my co-founder, many years back, where we wrote down all the things that we do in the business as founders, and we wrote down all the things that give us energy and all the things that take away energy. And what we found was there was such an overlap of like the things that take away Shane's energy gave me energy and vice versa. And it was like 50-60% of my time was spent on tasks that were draining my energy. We just swapped them. We literally 3x'd our revenue that year just by like us being in the, because I love selling, I love sales. Shane hates it, right? uh, Finance, operations, I don't want to be involved in that. Shane loves that. Great, right? So just that simple task of us sitting down and doing that. And to your point about having that foundation of these are my goals for the year and kind of breaking it down, it makes it really easy when you constantly get distractions to say, is this getting me to where I want to go? And if the answer is no, then the answer is no. So I'm not going to do it, especially when there's so much flying in your direction and so many distractions and new topics and new technology and everything AI, the list goes on. So I love the fact you have that solid foundation of like, is this aligned personally, professionally, with your values and your goals? And if the answer is no, then you got your decision. You got your answer as well.
Exactly. It
Yeah,
helps make better decisions for me and helps make sure that I am magnifying
yeah,
and multiplying the impact of whatever I'm doing.
yeah.
And, there are times where just showing up is appropriate and all that's called for. And, maybe a choir recital or a swim meet or a lacrosse game or whatever it might be. showing up is really important as a parent to do that, or as a cheerleader. And, maybe an aunt, maybe a grandmother, or, or a teacher, whatever. But it is knowing why you're there. And if you don't ask and answer those questions, the opportunity, I think, is diluted, and as is your time. And
Yeah,
time is the most precious gift. We need to treat it like it is. So,
100%. Listen, I could talk to you forever. Before I let you go, what would be your parting advice for those HR leaders of tomorrow that are going to be sitting in your seat one day?
well, learn something new every day. And, the last year I've been spending time learning about AI and how to deploy it in a service environment. And let me tell you, the payoff's amazing, not only for me, but for the people around me, the people we serve. But I think that HR needs to understand that we are moving in a world that is bifurcated. We have the technologists that know everything about everything, including AI and how to use it. And then you have people that are struggling to read when nearly half of the world is illiterate. And we need to be able to balance those depending upon your industry and the people that you recruit. And so it really is step back and understand the population and adjust to serve them, meet them where they are. And remembering the corporate goals, the two-sided coin, but meet people where they are, and let them thrive. And I have seen that time and time again be the formula for success, not only for individuals, but for companies.
Amazing. Well, listen, I appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. It was a pleasure. And one day you're going to have to teach me to ride a horse.
There you go. There you go. But they will teach you.
Yeah, how did I know you was going to say that? Listen, all the best. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. You have a great day. Thank you so much.